Welcome to the LumiCast, your premier gateway to the universe of limitless photo editing. Dive into the galaxy of Luminar software and the dynamic world of AI photo editing. Join us weekly for a burst of creativity and the drive to transform your photos with confidence and skill. Broadcasting directly from Clever Photographer headquarters, it's time to welcome your hosts, Jakub and Holly Linton.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of LumiCast. We are back, me Jakub and my friend Holly Linton, with another incredible episode where again we're focusing on photography, photo editing, and of course our beloved Luminar NEO. Hello Holly, how are you?
Hi Jakub, I'm doing great today. Looking forward to our topic.
Awesome. What are we going to talk about?
We're going to talk about how to avoid over-editing our images, which I'm sure we all suffer from at some point in our hobby.
Definitely. Now, I think lots of photographers over-edit when they start, but also we do lots of over-editing when we learn or when we get a new tool. I quite often notice it when, for example, Luminar NEO release a new tool, like a water enhancer or back in the day, the starlight or sky replacement. People just go and they replace sky on everything and they add stars or sunshine to everything and they fix water on everything. You know, after a while, you can really see it on every picture. So I think you've got to be a little bit careful with that. But we have a whole bunch of examples of over editing, and then we also have some tips on how to avoid it, right?
Yes. And I think you're right. There's always a little bit of a learning curve when the new tools come out. So Definitely. This will be good for everybody to listen in on.
Excellent. So as I mentioned, we're going to start by going through 5 over editing examples each. And Holly will start.
All right. The first one I've picked would be oversaturation. And it's really pretty much quite obvious, unless you're colorblind, that you will see an image where like the green, the blue, the red is just obviously the word saturation. It's just like insane to look at. So to me, that's a very, very obvious one. If you see someone's image, you can, oh my gosh, that is just too over the top with color, basically. So that would be the first one I would pick, would be a big editing mistake.
Oversaturation, you're right.
Yeah.
Sometimes when the image is too saturated, your eyes almost hurt after a while. When you're looking at it, they start to hurt. So it's really, it's overpowering. Okay. Oversaturation. So in my case, another example of over editing is using too much blur or this kind of bokeh effect. Now, this is something that is usually done selectively. So for example, you have the main subject as a portrait of someone, and then you really soften their background. So you really push the blur slider, or you really push the bokeh slider, or the background softness slider. And when you overdo it, a little bit like on iPhones or mobile phones, the background becomes so soft that you get this little super sharp edge around the portrait, and it just looks so obvious that, it's terrible to look at, actually. I know that at some point, when the phone started to use this, you would basically, how it would work, the camera would take 2 images, your background and you, and then it would melt it together or blend it together and try to create this effect. And it was terrible. I always hated it. And I still really don't enjoy it when it's overdone in photos. So too much of the blur or bokeh effect is another example of over editing. What do you have on your list?
Mm-hmm. All right. My second one would be over sharpening. So just you kind of have to know the balance of using the sharpening and the noise reduction tool, as we've talked about in other episodes. But I can tell if someone has over sharpened, again, it just catches your eye that everything in their picture is like crisp and almost crunchy looking, and they've done it on the entire image typically, not just one little section of it. So it's super duper over detailed. So you just have to be careful of how much sharpening you're really applying and kind of those rules or ratios of balancing your sharpness versus your noise reduction.
That's a classic one as well. You're right. Oversaturation and over sharpening are probably the 2 most common mistakes. Not mistakes. Well, they are the examples of over editing. And when you using a photo editing software which just have a one sharpening slider, this is less common. But when you use software like Luminar NEO, where the sharpening slider is on maybe 5 or 6 different locations, so you have a sharpening slider in denoise and super sharp AI and details tool and develop tool and develop raw tool, it can happen that you actually by mistake apply it several times over and over. And then, as you mentioned, it is just way too strong. And you're right that yes, you want a sharp photo, but there is a then point which you step over and it's just over sharpened and it's not natural at all. So that's a great example. So in my case, following that, as you already mentioned, there is a balance of sharpening and noise reduction. And in general, sharpening will make the image more crisp and noise reduction will do the opposite. It will make it soft. And when you overdo it, now you have this luminosity or luminance noise reduction slider. When you overdo it, generally when you go 40% on the slider and above, you will really start to see how the image is getting softer and softer. And that's because the whole idea of the noise reduction is to look for these rogue pixels, which are the noise, and remove their contrast. So you're removing the sharpening and edges. And when you really push the noise reduction slider, it softens the image and it doesn't look realistic at all. So while obviously removing noise is really important, you can also damage the image by overdoing it.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So that is mine. What about your next example?
All right. My third one is a little bit of a combination of things, would be kind of over contrast, over brightness, which to me is really paying attention to your histogram, making sure that your highlights aren't blown out. People might not be familiar with using their histogram properly.
Definitely. And that's super important. And also your favorite, the key J on the keyboard will activate a really important tool, which will help us. That's the clipping mask. So that brings me to my next over editing example. And this one is also quite common, and it's unrealistic dodge and burn. Now we're moving to the local adjustments here. So we're talking about, using the brush and maybe making some parts brighter and some parts darker. And I think this is a great tool and it can really improve the image. It can really make it look much more professional and it allow you to direct the viewer's eyes to specific parts of your photo. However, what's really important to know or to do when you're doing it is to follow the natural light which is already there. So if there is a part where the sun is shining and it's already bright, then make it brighter with your brush. But there is no point to try to brighten the area which is clearly in a shadow and there is no clear or obvious source of light there. And it just looks so suspicious immediately when you look at the image that you just need to try to avoid it. So definitely use dodge and burn. It's a great technique to add the local contrast to your photos. But as I say, if you're not sure, then follow the natural direction of the light. Just emphasize it with these brushes and that works the best. So try to avoid overdoing it and just be careful about it.
Mm-hmm.
So what is next on your list, Holly?
All right. My fifth. Oh, wait, no, we're on the fourth one now.
Fourth.
I'm not that good at math, but I think we're on the fourth one. So that would be adding too many layers or overlays that don't make sense to your overall goal. For example, there's like talking about composites. People maybe put a whole bunch of stuff into an image. It's not all the same really subject matter, or it makes you go, why did they put that in that composite? It doesn't look right. And that kind of maybe would also be, making sure it's matching the scene with the lighting, like you just mentioned, and putting the proper shadows and stuff, if there needs to be shadows around a building. So kind of where you'd be like, okay, is that a real scene or did they just fake all of this? You kind of want everything to look real or believable. Unless it's like a super duper fantasy scene that you're not trying to trick anybody, I guess, with some of your pictures. But for this topic of over editing, you don't want people to question,
Yep.
What is this all about?
No, you're 100% right. Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And of course, you're right that we have to make a difference between traditional photography and heavy composites, where you could have 30, 40 different layers on top of each other. But for a traditional photography, the less is more most of the time. However, I am damaged by your photo of a cow being what was it, on the top of a red room in a Valentine's pack or something like that?
Yes, a cow with lipstick and jewelry. You didn't believe that really took place? That was my living room.
I believe that it took in your mind. Anyway, great point. And I think the over adding the layers, come back to my initial thought before we started, that when we get a new tools and new toys, we like to use them. So imagine you just bought Power Bundle, for example, and there is 300 new overlays. So people just go and try to put them all there, and it just kills the image. So you have this great library, definitely, but that is meant to be for lots of different projects, and you need to use them wisely. So I see people mixing on top of each other different textures and canvas texture and fine art texture, and it's just way too much, and different sparkles. So try to avoid that, be gentle with it, and use it for your advantage rather than the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, on that point, it's time for my fourth point, which is over HDR, which is also connected with the structure tool or structure tool in Luminar NEO or clarity slider in Lightroom or other similar softwares. Basically, when the image becomes just too defined, too HDR, everything is too perfect, everything is overlaid, everything has too many details, too much contrast, too much everything. Now, this HDR look, this kind of heavy one, was really popular, I would say about 7 or 8 years ago. It was really something new and people enjoyed it a lot, but it never really looked natural. You know, it was a nice thing to do because it was popular back then, but it never looked natural. And now the photography really moved back towards the direction of being natural and being less over-edited looking. And this is where HDR is a great technique for recovering details in darker and brighter areas, but it's not meant to be necessarily a tool to over-edit your photos. So if you're using HDR, if you're using Structure AI, if you're using Clarity Slider, be gentle with it, go just a little bit, add a little bit of contrast, and leave it there. Don't overdo it.
Okay.
So that is my over HDR. What's your fifth point then?
My fifth one would be about vignetting.
Oh, yes.
I typically add a vignette at the end of every edit, and you want to make sure that you can't tell that somebody used a vignette. So the over editing there would be you could see a defined black edge, or in Luminar NEO, we also have the option to do a white vignette when you pull the slider to the right. So just be aware of your, feathering, the feathering of the vignette and the amount. I just pull it. I look in my peripheral. I don't look in my peripheral vision. I guess I have peripheral vision where I'm staring at the picture and I'm dragging the vignette slider and just looking at the corners. And once I see the tiniest bit of darkness coming into play, that's when I take my hand off the mouse and just leave my vignette there. That would be my fifth one. Don't over-edit your vignette.
Definitely. That's a classic one. If I would have to look at the list we mentioned, over-saturation, over-sharpening, and too much vignette are the three most common I see. So that's a great point. And you're right. You just got to be careful with it. Well, that brings me nicely to my fifth point, which will follow the idea of over-editing, but this time for portrait photography. So I'm talking about over-smoothing the skin. Now, different software, different applications have different tools for this, but most of the recent softwares have a slider where you can smooth the skin, maybe you remove different imperfections and make it just smoother. And when you go crazy with it, like to the 100% or whatever, it looks like on, really badly edited TikTok or Instagram photo of someone. And again, similarly to the HDR, it's something that has been popular. And usually this happens when the tool is released, when it starts to. So this, we're talking maybe like 3-4 years ago, when these possibilities came out that you would be able to smooth the skin. People really used it a lot. But now, definitely it's going away. You're looking for editing, but very much in natural way. So you're looking for perfect natural edit, basically, when it comes to portraits. And while you can obviously still use the smoothing, you want to just find the right point. So definitely use it, but just look for a way when you look at it a little bit later, it doesn't look so natural. It doesn't look so obvious. That's the right word I was looking for. So over smoothing the skin. Do you use a skin smoothing in Luminar NEO, Holly?
Well, I do believe that was one of my favorite tools when we did our Oscars episode. Yeah, Skin AI is one of my favorites. I feel like it keeps everything looking natural, but you probably wouldn't want to pull it all the way to 100. My little tip of how do you know how much to use? Well, I typically go with whatever age the person is. So, for my selfie, I pull it to 21, Oh, all right. I pull it to 55. I'll have to be honest with that one. But with my kids, I'll pull it to like the 20s for a 20-some-year-old.
That's a great idea. I love that.
Yeah.
Following the age. Okay, well, on that fun note, we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us because we're going to come back in about a minute and we talk about some ideas on how to avoid the over-editing.
If you're listening to the LumiCast podcast, then we share something in common. We love editing photos, and we love Luminar. It's almost breathtaking what this amazing tech can do for you. On our website, you'll find countless different things to help you be more creative than you ever thought imaginable. From our photo manipulation masterclass to our power bundle with 986 elements, our essential preset bundle, editing software and extensions to our tutorials. Harness the power at the website at www.cleverphotographer.com/Luminar. Again, that's cleverphotographer.com/Luminar. Now, back to LumiCast.
And we are back with more photography fun. I always love these little jingles talking about the Clever Photographer Luminar NEO products. By the way, if you haven't checked, I just released a Luminar NEO Sky Replacement Masterclass. It's on our website. It's a really good one. Anyway, back to our topic. We are still talking about over-editing in photography. We just ran through 10 points and 10 examples of over-editing, and we both agreed that oversaturation, over-sharpening, and too much vignette are probably the most common ones in photography. But now we also want to share with you some tips on how to avoid the over-editing. And Holly have the first one.
All right. One tip would be just because the sliders go to 100 does not mean that you should pull them to 100.
Oh, yes.
Now, having said that though, when I do my edits, I typically will pull it to 100 just to see the effect that it's having, but then pull it back. I'm sure people have heard that throughout, your videos. So for the most part, I don't think any tool should ever be at 100. The only thing I've ever left at 100 would be if I was using a preset. I tend to keep my presets at 100.
That's a great point.
And then tweak the tools that were used in the preset. But otherwise, I would say never be at 100% for anything because you're pretty much probably going to have an over edit in that case.
That's a great point. You're right. So you're right on both points. Use the slider and really bring it all the way up and see what the tool does, because there's so many people who just apply like 4 or 5% and then they are surprised that nothing is happening. And if you're just discovering the tool, you really want to see the full effect of what the tool does. And then that's the important part, bring it down and get the natural look, which, depending on your image can be different amount, but you're right, 100% seems to be always too much. Mm-hmm. Now, talking about my idea or suggestion when it comes to over editing is definitely always keep zooming in on details, zooming in on different parts of your image. Now, the general rule is 100%, but I think quite often 100% is just not enough. So I go 150, 200% and look for these different parts, look for the noise, the edges, maybe the sensor dust and different things. So this will just make it much easier. Definitely keep zooming in. 100, 150, 200% and keep checking on where you are with your edit, because that will definitely help you to avoid the over editing part. What's next on yours, Holly?
All right. My next tip would be step away from the computer and either step away and look at it from a distance. I've done that. I've even done that to see if the horizon is straight.
Yeah.
And then also step away and go for a walk. We sit at our computers for too long. So go get a little stretch break in, have a snack, come back and look at it later, or even maybe the next day. And I know I've said this in other podcast episodes where, the next day I might even change my mind and say, what did I do that for? So you get a different perspective. And then I just noticed something before we started our podcast today, that I got a new pair of reading glasses to use for the computer with stronger magnification. And the glasses are making everything look like, I don't know if the word is concave or convex. It's like my computer screen looks like it's on an angle. So check your glasses and what you're using to look at your computer screen with. So I'm sending these glasses back to Amazon today.
Oh, that's a shame.
So yeah. take a good look, make sure you can see well, and take a good look and see if there's anything wrong with your picture.
That's a great point, Holly. Yeah. And I think this is probably the most important point out of this whole episode, because you're right, taking a break, going away from the screen, stop looking at the image, that makes a massive difference. And I like how you mentioned that look at it next day. What happens to the pictures? So let's say you edit them 5 years ago and you look at them today. It's also huge. Because we mentioned both several times that when we look at some pictures we edited like a year ago, but maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you're thinking, what have I done that for? Anyway, but you're right. Basically, the idea is, or the reason why this is it, is that our eyes very quickly adjust to what they see. And if you're looking at the same image for half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, they will just stop seeing things like saturation, like sharpening, like all of this, and they will just accept it that it's fine. So you're right. Go out, have a coffee, or go for a walk, come back later or next day, and you will definitely see much more than in that moment. So that's a great point. And to my point, how to avoid the over editing is quite obvious. It's just to keep comparing the image you edited with the original photo. And if the difference is massive, that you almost can't recognize the original photo, that's a good indication that something is wrong. Now, I am a person who like to edit my pictures a lot. I really make them saturated and beautiful and contrasty and powerful. So the difference is big. But I always think that at least I need to recognize the original photo. If the original photo doesn't look like anything you created, then that is a clear sign that something isn't right. So let's just quickly run through the 4 ideas on how to avoid the over editing. First, we talk about the sliders. Obviously, as Holly mentioned, even though you can go to 100%, that's not always the good option. Then we talk about the need of zooming in and out, 100%, 150, 200%. Keep an eye on these details, noise, sharpening and all that. Then the most important one is to take a break, go away and come back and then look at the image again. And then keep comparing your edited photo with the original one. Wow, Holly, I love that. Did you like this episode?
Yes. And of course, I'm sure they can find some further instruction on it on your YouTube page. So go to Clever Photographers YouTube and find some additional videos.
Definitely. And in fact, actually, I just started now. I don't know when exactly this one will air, but I just started remaking the series focusing on the individual tools in Luminar NEO, because last time I recorded this was almost 3.5 years ago. And I know that some of the tutorials are outdated and the informations aren't correct. And probably the most important is that the interface doesn't look the same. The software doesn't look the same. The colors changed and the logos changed. I basically started to record new videos for the individual tools, and I'm hoping to be finished with it by October 2025. So definitely come back, check out all the videos we have there, because I think that can only help you to keep improving your photo editing skills. Well, on that note, it's time to go. Shame, it always goes so fast. Thank you, Holly, for joining us.
You're welcome.
And we'll see you guys, or at least talk to you again next week on Friday. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Don't over edit.
Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap. Now, there's only 3 things left to do. Subscribe to this podcast so you never miss a future episode. Visit our website at cleverphotographer.com/LumiCast to see what we have in store next. And stay creative and keep editing your photos no matter what anyone says.